There is no decision more important in life than what to have for dessert. And of course, when you're looking at the menu, you're thinking of all kinds of things. Well, it's too cold for ice cream. But if I get ice cream, I can add sprinkles. Wait. There's tiramisu. Oh yes, when there's tiramisu, you can stop looking at everything else. It is the checkmate of desserts. But today, sadly, we're not going to eat dessert. We are going to continue our discussion of how to make the best move, how to make that decision, because you know what? It comes up every single move, unlike dessert, which only happens once a day, or maybe with every meal. Okay, this is a real chess position that Fun Master Mike got when I was a kid. Looks pretty normal. I've allowed white to build up a strong center, but I've started to attack the center because I played the move c5, and I hope to destroy that center. But wait, before I can do that, my opponent's center gets going. Here comes the snowplow pawn to e5, and we have a major decision already. This is an advanced edition alert. We've got to figure out what do we do in this position. Okay, let's go through how to select our chess move. Now, the first thing I thought was just to move the knight. If I play my knight back to g8, well, technically my knight is safe. Although that's kind of like putting the tiramisu back in the refrigerator, because that knight is not going to get to play chess for a long time. I think that white has a big advantage with that snowplow. Now, I could bring my knight out to a square like h5. My knight is a little more involved on h5. However, the immediate g4 would trap my knight. I actually had this happen to me once in a chess game. Now, I would not necessarily give up. I have some tricks. For example, never want to be defeatist in chess. You always want to look for chances to make a comeback. Hey, that would be a good chessable course. Wait a minute. Ideas are coming in my brain. But before we can get to that, let's stick with YouTube. Bishop takes bishop is an interesting idea. That way I get a piece. Now, if he takes my knight, I just save my bishop and it's even Steven. Now, if the knight takes, I have this really neat idea. Queen to d7, which forks the knight and the pawn. After all, that pawn was not defended. Loose pieces drop off. However, my opponent has an equally brilliant defense here. Queen to e2, simply ignoring the pawn, but guarding the knight. And here's the idea. If I go pawn grabbing, then this knight gets to hop into c7 and tickles my king and tickles my rook. And that is Forktown. Population me, population sad. Let's not do that. Now, I could try a counterattack like a6. Now, if the knight retreats, I actually could take the pawn because Forktown is closed for repairs. However, now white could play kamikaze or desperado piece, whatever you want to call it. White would play knight takes d6, realizing he's going to get his knight back at some point anyway. And then it's check, so I have to take. And then white would play another in-between move, pawn takes pawn, discovered check, winning my knight back. Now, for those of you out there who have ratings getting close to 1,500 or 1,800 or 2,000, you may continue your analysis. You might say, Fun Master Mike, you taught me to always look further. I'm going to play king to d8. Yeah. That way, when the knight's captured, I skewer or I pin your queen and your king. But white has this nice defensive move, knight to e5. And before you can put pressure on the pinned piece, notice your own queen is hanging. That's not quite going to work. Whew. That was some long analysis. But if we go back, we have now seen why knight h5 is not played. What about direct captures? You could play bishop takes bishop. The problem is white is not going to take that bishop. White's going to take this knight, and you have two bishops hanging. And as you know, bishops are great in combination to attack, but they can never guard each other. Now, you could take this pawn, hoping that after knight takes, you could have a loose piece and it would drop off after queen a5 check. But white simply guides the knight back to the happy square. And even if you try to put pressure on the pinned piece, white has enough defensive firepower to take that back. And to count, it seems that white has 1, 2, 3 minor pieces. You only have 2. Advantage white, and the opening has not gone very well. Let's go back. What about some other capture? Pawn takes pawn. Well, the problem there again is that pawn takes knight, and your bishop is hanging. And if you take, white calmly takes back. Now the count is 4 minor pieces for white, 3 for black, still sad face. What are we going to do? We have gone through all of these candidate moves. None of them seem to work. So, by the process of elimination, either black is just losing or knight to g4 must be playable. Now, luckily, it is playable. Fun Master Mike was black, and I knew my openings a little bit, and I knew that knight to g4 was an only move. Way back in the days of chess books. Remember those? When you had a forced move, an only move, we used to put a square beside the move or around the move. And that meant it's forced. it's the only move to play, and luckily, I found the move knight to g4. Now, I was probably hoping my opponent would just take my bishop, and I would just take back and develop a knight and be pretty happy, but my opponent played the most aggressive move. Pawn to e6, and because this bishop is pinned, my bishop cannot take back like it wants to. Now, this is actually a relatively easy decision for what to do. In this position, the pawn is quite strong. I can't take with the bishop, so pawn takes is probably the only move. Now, I do want to say, for those 3 or 4 kids out there who have ratings well above 2,000, you might know that later this move was found to be playable. And if the pawn takes, the king hides on d7. However, this is too crazy to recommend. I am never going to teach an opening to kids where your pawn gets captured on f7. You walk your king to d7, but I will just say that very smart people have studied this position and have determined that black is okay. But I am not going to play chess that way. Oh no. In the game, I simply took the pawn. This was one of those easy decisions, kind of like when tiramisu is on the menu. Now, my opponent continued the aggressiveness and played knight to g5. Discovered attack on this knight. Notice that's one of the key ideas of playing e6 is you cut off the bishop's protection. Of course, the bishop was pinned, so I would argue it wasn't guarding anyway. But now, I've got a lot of problems. My pawn is hanging because the bishop is pinned. The knight's about to capture, and when it does, it'll be forking the queen and the bishop. And we've already mentioned this queen just made a discovered attack on the knight. It's pretty hard to guard everything. In this position, if I just simply guard my knight, then the knight takes, and it forks my queen and my bishop. That is bad news bears. Funmaster Mike not going to be happy after a position like this. Now, I guess if we go back to this position, I could try some other move of defending, but I don't really see what that move is. If I just simply castle or something, so that knight takes and the bishop is defended, well, then my other problem happens. I just lose my knight. So sometimes in chess, when you really have no good defensive moves, and here I don't see a single good defensive move, what I'm going to try to do is capture as much stuff as I can. In case I have to give it back later, I'll at least be ahead in material. So really, the only move in this position is bishop takes bishop. Let's see what white does. In this position, I'm already up a piece. That's actually kind of important that I'm up a piece because I might need to give it back later depending on what exactly white does. Now, if white takes this knight, I can now save my bishop and prevent this fork by guarding my pawn. A move like bishop to c4 makes a lot of sense. And yeah, white could take this pawn, but at least I get rid of the strong knight and I stop the fork and I'm back in the game. So, what did white do? Well, white played the most challenging move, which is knight takes e6. And yeah, don't adjust your television. I know you're not watching on television. Don't adjust your smartphone because I know it looks like Funmaster Mike is getting totally crushed out of the opening. Number one, I do want to remind you that I am up a piece, okay? Now, if we count what's going on, my queen, yeah, she's hanging. My bishop, also hanging. This bishop, yeah, hanging. And stop me if you heard this before, my knight, also hanging. Is this the worst position Funmaster Mike has ever gotten in? Almost, but we're gonna go back to our strategy. I've had to choose the best move, and we're gonna find a way to not lose this position. First of all, you can't just play a regular old defensive move. If, for example, you decide to move your queen, after all, she is the strongest piece. Maybe you're thinking in this position, hey, the queen is safe. I'm kind of guarding the bishop. And if the knight takes, I'll actually make a discovered defense of this knight. And my king might go to f7 and, trap the knight on g7. These are all good thoughts. The problem is that white will keep the incredibly strong knight here. White will keep your bishop en prise. This bishop will be en prise. And the queen will take the knight. And if I can continue my French lesson, black's position is cauchemar. It is a nightmare. In this position, I'm no longer ahead material. Both bishops are still hanging, essentially. Notice if this bishop gets captured and my queen tries to capture back, do you see what's coming next, chess kids? We have a family fork, a royal fork, as some kids call it. When the knight lands on c7, my king will be in danger. My rook will be in danger because you saw my queen would be on b5. Yeah, flashing square b5. My queen would also be in danger. This position actually is losing. So if we need to go back, and we do, What do we do in this position where all 4 pieces are hanging? Well, we can't just lose our queen. We know that, okay? We can't just sit there and let all of our minor pieces get captured. So there's exactly one saving move. And I will say, chess kids, when you look like you're in a totally lost position, you have my permission to look at the most creative, weird-looking moves. You can answer attacks with attacks. You can throw every chess lesson I've ever taught you out the window in search of anything that will save your position. And it turns out there's exactly one move here that does not lose for black, and that is the amazing bishop takes d4. You might call this the desperation move, but hey, it actually works. We went through a lot of other moves first. We calculated them. They didn't quite work, but that means bishop takes d4 is worth a look. Probably not the first move that you would ever consider in such a position, but here is the point. First of all, you're wondering if the knight takes the queen. And you know what? We'll get there. Let's talk about some simpler moves first. If the queen takes the knight, well, in this position, I can actually save my hanging bishop by coming back to pin the knight to the queen. You get a queen, I get a queen, and it turns out I'll be okay in that position. Totally fine. So that's not quite going to work. Now, knight takes this bishop actually is a reasonable move, but now I have queen to a5 check, forking the king and the knight. And in this position, I'm actually not going to go further. I'm just going to have you trust me that black has just barely enough counterplay to survive. I do want to point out one line. If the pawn comes to c3, I can play bishop to f2 check, and your king can't go to the safest square because I'll take this knight with check. Your king actually has to walk to the very strange square d2. Neither king is going to feel safe, but black actually does have enough counterplay. Let's go back, because I know what you're wondering. In this position, what happens instead if my queen is captured? So we're going to go back. Yep, he doesn't capture the knight. He doesn't capture the bishop. What happens if he captures the queen? Well, I'm down a queen. But do you see how black can save the game despite being down a queen? Black has this wonderful idea, bishop to f2 check. Now, the king only has one legal move because this bishop survived. He can't even walk to the light squares anymore. The king has to go to d2 and then bishop to e3. Look at that. It's actually a draw by repetition because the king's only legal move is to go back, and then bishop back to f2 check leads to a draw. Now, I wasn't super happy about the draw, but I was happy that I found a way to not lose the game. Some pretty complicated stuff happened in this game, and I hope you're also realizing in this, our advanced edition of how to choose the best move, a lot of times it comes down to simple calculation. All of those rules about answering an attack with an attack and developing to defend and everything, sometimes you just have to become a calculator. But there's no need to calculate. If you're ever in Fun Master Mike's presence and there is tiramisu nearby, grab me a slice and I'll enjoy it with you.